Forward podcast, special episode extraordinaire. We have finally reached the hill. We finally reached the peak of the mountain, but as the mythological story of Sisyphus tells us, there is no peak. You continue pushing that boulder up and up and up. I'm so happy to have Rio with me, and I'm so happy to be a part of another episode of the Moving Forward podcast. We're going to go ahead and get started with that episode. So we'll do the intro and we'll run it from there. If you guys have anything you want us to talk about, be sure and leave it in the chat. I'm so glad to see you guys with me.
All right. Welcome to the Moving Forward podcast. This is the first episode we've done since the election, and it has been called for Joe Biden. So unless Trump succeeds at stealing the election by throwing out a bunch of mail-in votes in key swing states, we at least know the result. So I invited Seth to come on and talk to me the moment we had a result to talk about. So here's Seth from the Dividend Report back again for election talk. Say hi, Seth.
Hey, Rio. Thank you so much for having me on. We made it.
Yeah, we did it. We defeated Orange Man Bad. And I you notice I instantly updated my my Twitter avatar to a crying Pepe the Frog with a red cap on.
You know, that was provocative.
I'm not being diplomatic. I've decided I'm going to troll the fuck out of these assholes. Like,
yeah,
they did it to us for 4 years, so why not?
This is the thing. They can totally do it anytime they want. That's their modus operandi. It's the liberal snowflakes. We're going to make them cry tears. Ha ha ha. Joke, joke, joke. So like, why do I have this knee-jerk reaction whenever something good happens for the other side, where it's like, well, I don't want to make them sad. I don't want to step on any toes here. Let's be thoughtful. Is that just a difference in the way the two sides work?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't see the real divide, as you know, Seth, between left and right. I see it between decent and indecent, between liberal and illiberal, and between rational and irrational, and between sane and crazy. So yes, it does say something about the two sides in that context, very much so. It does. I don't believe that everybody on the right fits those descriptors. I consider myself on the right, but Trump voters certainly do.
And expanding outwards just a little bit to being able to declare victory. This is just an important part of being human, especially like if you're into sports. When your team wins, dude, like go out into the streets, party. I saw this amazing picture of people like popping champagne in the middle of the streets in Washington, D.C. Like you should be able to take a victory, feel good about it. Like there's all this negativity that's throwing around, and I get it, but there is a time to celebrate, and that goes for both sides. When you lose, it feels bad. When you win, it should feel good. Allow yourself to feel good. Everyone who's listening to this podcast, the Moving Forward community, feel good about this. This is what you have done. This, me and Rio, we did what we could, but you showed up, and I'm so proud of you guys.
Yeah. I if there are any Trump supporters who still are listening to the Moving Forward podcast, then you're some of the more open-minded Trump supporters out there. Because I have had almost nobody on the podcast who supports it. The one time that back when Corey was still co-hosting the show with me, the one time we had an actual contemporary Trump supporter on, as opposed to an ex-Trump supporter, he just about had me killed. So
have you guys?
Although I do. To be honest, I do sometimes wonder, like, and this is a problem I intend to rectify in the post-Trump universe. But it does seem a little bit hypocritical and one-sided of me to say, like, oh, I'm willing to talk to essentially the radical left. I'm willing to talk to, socialist curious people. I'm willing to talk to anarcho-communists. And yet I wasn't willing to have any, alt-right, national socialist, fascist Nazis on, even though I kind of consider them to be the moral equivalent. I guess maybe that's the difference, is the moral equivalent of a Nazi would not be an anarcho-communist like Chet. It would be an authoritarian, tanky, Stalin did nothing wrong communist, and I didn't have any of those on. But I think just as a matter of optics, I need to start balancing it out by getting... Well, and first of all, I'd like to get some real far-right people on, which are not the same thing as alt-right, if only to help exemplify the difference between the two. A lot of people on the left don't know what actual far-right policy would look like, and you can tell that because they think we're already far-right.
Right,
Nope.
right. So to me, someone I guess who's on the left, which honestly, these days I just don't know. But my idea of what you're talking about here is a person who believes in the importance of homogeneous culture, traditionalism, the importance of conserving cultural values within a nation state. Does that sound along the same the lines of what you're thinking?
Well, I was talking about left-right spectrum on economic issues, not so
Hmm.
much social issues. I do think that if you were to come up with a divide on social issues, it would be something like individualism versus collectivism. And Yeah, I mean there are collectivist conservatives. That is a tradition that exists. I come from the individualist conservative tradition, which tends to be more right wing economically, whereas a collectivist conservative tradition is going to be more traditionalist on social values because they believe that everybody should conform. And if you think about it, that makes them a lot like the far left in the sense that the far left on social issues would want us all to conform to a certain kind of like maybe like an atheist state, um, where identity politics from the social justice side is forced on everybody. You're forced to agree with abortion in the third trimester and same-sex marriage and stuff like that. I guess you could say that. No, I'm more interested in the economic left right, and so for me a far right person economically would be somebody who opposes um, Social Security, opposes welfare, opposes Medicare. It wouldn't describe Donald Trump, for example, right? Donald Trump is more alt right, and he is more of the collectivist. His voters do come from more of that collectivist conservative tradition, which is not individualist.
Hmm. Interesting. Anarcho capitalism.
Anarcho capitalism would be far right. Although I actually uh, I think anarcho capitalism and anarcho communism are both oxymorons. But yes, a lot of people on the far right do identify as ANCAPs.
Hmm. You know, it's a big square with many different quadrants. Four, actually. I've heard four. People say four, and it's so expansive. And somehow within this election cycle, again, I guess we should say, hey, there was an election, and a lot of people voted. The highest record turnout in all of American history,
Yeah.
and we learned a lot, and we have a lot more questions as well, and we're going to dive into that. Rio, really quick, what is your takeaway as to what happened this week?
Yeah, my big takeaway really is that it went how I thought it was going to go, but not as much as I thought it was going to go that way. So I said to you on the podcast before the election that I thought it was going to look like Trump was winning the night of because they would count votes the day of first, and then over time, over the next few days, as they counted mail-in votes, Biden would take the lead, and that Trump would try to discredit that and say, no, 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 they should have called it the night of. I really won. The mail-in votes are illegal, blah, 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 blah. And that's exactly how it played out. But the difference is I had suspected that we might see what looked like an electoral college landslide for Trump on the first night. And in reality, this is a good thing. He was never really in the lead. He was in the lead in a few swing states before, Pennsylvania and Georgia and so forth. He was in the lead in a few swing states where Biden eventually took a lead himself. But even if he had won those states, he still would have lost the electoral college. He was never in the lead in Nevada, and they called Arizona fairly early for Biden. So that really makes it much harder for Trump to make his specious. It would have been specious in any case claim about mail-in ballots being illegitimate, but now I mean he would have to get the results on like several states thrown out in order to win.
Right, right. After 2016, everyone rightfully was pretty skeptical about the polling. And 2018 was interesting in that the polling kind of realigned. People were all expecting, hey, well, maybe 2016 was some kind of massive fluke. We're back on track now. It really does appear that Trump has some quality about him. There is something about Trump that breaks the polls every single time an election happens with his name on the ballot.
Do you know what that is? I think I know what it is.
Well, it's his cult of personality, right? It has to be.
Yeah, no, it's that, and it's the fact that in 2016 they didn't wait for education. Was that Nate Silver famously said that if the pollsters made a mistake, it was that they didn't wait for education. And this time I think they didn't wait hard enough for it. I think that Trump overperformed expectations among white working class voters in key swing states in 2016. And then they waited for that overperformance based on his overperformance last time. And then he overperformed that overperformance. I think that's what happened.
To me, I feel that this is correct inherently. On the night of the election, me and my girlfriend had sat down. We were starting to drink a little bit of wine and just trying to get this pit of anxiety outside of our existence. We suddenly started seeing the numbers come in and recognize that while turnout is a record, it is like people are turning out for Trump, and it's breaking our understanding of, there was this desire that there would be a repudiation of Trump and all the things that he stood for, and you would recognize that Americans had some deeper belief in just being decent people, and holy crap, actually no, there is like half of this country saw 4 years of this and said, yeah, I want that. That's my goal. That's my choice.
Yeah, I think that part of it was that it was. I think that some people saw this election as a referendum on the far left, and Trump certainly did what he could as a TV personality who knows how to read a crowd and knows how to talk to a certain kind of voter, knows how to speak their language, knows how to play on their fears. He certainly made an effort to amplify that and to associate Joe Biden with the radical left. But I have to say, the Democratic Party made it very easy for him to do it. Biden did everything right on those lines. I would have liked to see him denounce socialism even more than he did. But I'm worried that if he had gone to the extent that I would have liked to see him go, that he would have actually lost some of the left-wing voters that he actually did need. I'm not so sure about that. And in the end, his strategy worked. So thank goodness for Joe Biden. But yeah, no, I think that, the Democratic Party put Joe Biden in that position. And it's possible that there was no way that Biden could have handled it any better than he did. But yeah, I mean, it's the fault of the Democratic Party that Biden was in that position where he has to worry about alienating the centrist, center to center right voters that he needs in key swing states on both economic and social issues in order to keep his base, or he has to alienate the base in order to get those swing voters. So the Democratic Party, if it learns anything from the fact that they almost lost to the worst president in U.S. history, it needs to be that they should start telling people like Bernie Sanders and AOC, who support social democratic policies that are not socialism, that they should stop calling themselves socialists because they're making it all too easy. There are a lot of liberals who voted for Donald Trump or stayed home. It was a referendum on Trump and it was a referendum on the far left. And so there was a lot of people turned out because they were very, very, very enthusiastic about defeating Trump. And a lot of people who were not enthusiastic about Trump turned out because they were enthusiastic about defeating the far left. And they saw Biden as a puppet of the far left, even though they're wrong about that. In politics, all that matters is optics.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. I have to backtrack to how I came across to believing universal basic income was a necessity. And it was understanding that the labor market would be dramatically changing in the years to come. All the things that Yang spoke about in the war on normal people, like when this starts to happen and the number one job in 29 states and among others starts to get displaced, you can't bet on people by themselves just becoming aware of what's happening around them. You can bet them voting on fear. You can bet them voting against ideals that they are told every single day by Rupert Murdoch Incorporated are coming out to get you, your culture, your way of life, tribalism. All of these things will be the thing that they go to. And it feels like we're already there. Even before the fourth industrial revolution really sunk its teeth into the labor market, we're already there. We're already dealing with a major portion of our population who are extremely like they're ready to get out there and vote against anything that they consider socialist. And that messaging is crucially important. We have to get the messaging right. And Andrew Yang actually was on CNN the other night, and he had something to say along these lines. And I wanted to play that very quickly just for people to hear exactly what he had to say, because I think it was extremely interesting. Do we have a moment for that?
Yes, please.
All right, let me know if there's any issues with the sound. Just give a wave, but here we go.
We're back now with Andrew Yang, S.E. Cupp, and John Avlon. Interesting conversation with Congresswoman Dingell.
Yeah.
You heard what she said. She's Democrats don't do a good
Yeah, I'm
job
not
of
able to hear
speaking
that.
to.
Okay. And Rio, I also just realized here that I have not been recording this entire time. We can get the rest of the recording from my live stream, so I can send it over to you. But I am recording at this moment. Oh, man, I knew we were missing one thing. But very quickly, just bear with me one moment. I'm just going to fix this.
Mhm. Yeah, you can just send me the audio from your YouTube channel.
Yeah,
That'll work.
I think that'll work. It might have a little bit of a difference in quality. So if you're here at this point of the episode, that's the reason why things may be a little different. All right, let's take
I'll
another
probably
look
just
here.
upload all the audio from the YouTube just because it's simpler.
Okay, all right, that works. All right, how about now?
Working class people. What do you say to that? You're supposed to be fixing that.
I had that experience countless times on the trail, Don, where I would say, hey, I'm running for president to a truck driver, retail worker, a waitress in a diner, and they would say, what party? And I'd say Democrat, and they would flinch. Like I'd said something really negative, or I just had turned another color or something like that. And there's something deeply wrong when working class Americans have that response to a major party that theoretically is supposed to be fighting for them. So you have to ask yourself, what has the Democratic Party been standing for in their minds? And in their minds, the Democratic Party, unfortunately, has taken on this role of the coastal urban elites who are more concerned about policing various cultural issues than improving their way of life that has been declining for years. And so if you're in that situation, this to me is a fundamental problem for the Democratic Party, because if they don't figure this out, then this polarization and division will get worse, not better.
Is that real or messaging or both?
It's real. I mean, Debbie just said they lost a plant that had 1,500 workers. And so if you're a laid off worker from that plant and you look up and say, what is the Democratic Party doing for me? It's unclear. And we can talk about a unifying message from Joe Biden. He's a naturally very unifying figure. But then there's the reality on the ground where their way of life has been disintegrating for years. And if we don't address that, then you're going to see a continued acceleration toward the institutional mistrust that animated the Trump vote and will continue to do so.
Democratic socialism,
Often,
what Bernie Sanders says. I think saying you're a socialist,
not invented.
it's not good messaging to say that to call yourself a democratic socialist, because then people relate it to actual socialist countries.
Well, sure, yeah, they believe
The problem is that we're coding certain language to separate us into tribes. And I want to go back to what John said about Ohio. Ohio used to be the swing state, and now it's trending red. And you have to ask why. It's because their way of life's been heading the wrong direction. We have not done enough about it.
Yeah.
So really quick, I just want to say it's amazing that we're hearing this type of discussion happening on mainstream media, because that's exactly the stuff that, like, Yang is just hitting it right on the head. And two, like, he's completely right. We're falling back into tribalism and all of these things. I hope that more people, he's moving to Georgia to try and get on the pulpit and talk about Biden and swing some votes as we move forward, because there's this huge question of, do we have the Senate? Is Biden going to be continually stopped? Right. I said at the last episode we had, that was one of my worst fears. Are we going to have 2 years of stagnation and allow this deep festering rot to continue? Because I don't think we can afford to have that happen. But anyways, what are your thoughts?
Oh boy. Okay, where to begin? A lot of mainstream Democrats saw Yang's statement there as yet another Yang-style dog whistle to the alt-right and to their own form of identity politics. There's a relationship between the grievance culture that Donald Trump took advantage of, where people are worried about their economic prospects, and they frankly never really bought into the small government individualist style of conservatism. They were always part of that collectivist style of conservatism, which means that they don't like it when people tell them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They don't like it when people tell them that, they need to take personal responsibility for their lot in life. It's all too appealing when they have somebody like Donald Trump come along and tell them that it's all the fault of coastal elites and it's all the fault of establishment Republicans and establishment Democrats, and that he's going to solve the problem as the ultimate big government person. So yeah, I think that what we're witnessing here is the realization that for most of my life, the Republican Party elites were small government conservatives, who are more liberal in comparison, by which I don't mean liberal in the American sense of a colloquialism for left wing, but liberal in the sense of the philosophy of classic liberalism, which centers individual liberty and small government. But a huge chunk of their voters are these ex-Dixiecrats who only switched Republican because the Democratic Party embraced civil rights. And so I can understand why some mainstream Democrats today would think that Andrew is dog whistling to the alt-right and to identity politics grievance of the alt-right, because on those issues, Trump voters are wrong. They're wrong to oppose equality for women and people of color. They're wrong to oppose same-sex marriage because they're taking the big government position on those social issues.
I need to interject right here. Very
please,
quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. It's not just Andrew Yang. I was watching Hassan the Hun on Twitch last night, and he brought up Bernie Sanders. I think I forget he was essentially saying the same thing. We are failing the messaging to the working class. He said the working class, and then you get this barrage of far left commentary on Twitter, on social media, that say working class is a dog whistle for white Americans. And it's this really weird, bizarre thing that twists your head around. They started attacking Bernie Sanders. Like, let that sink in. They're attacking Bernie Sanders for using the term working class because they automatically equate that to white Americans. And it's very bizarre to me because the working class, the proletariat, if you will, like if you are going very far left, you need to understand that it is every single race, background, ethnicity, whatever, are in the working class, but they're like biting onto this. And one of the things that Hassan said himself that I think I am becoming more and more in agreement with is that this is like some seed that's been planted by some like right ideology to say, hey, listen, we're just going to go ahead and run with this snowball. This is actually another piece of racist propaganda and everything. We have to talk purely along the lines of social justice, purely along the lines of race theory. And if you're not doing that, then you're only appealing to white people. It kind of blew my mind open when I saw this happen.
Yeah, no, part of what's confusing there is that there are neo-Marxist people who take an identity politics narrative that's basically about the oppression Olympics, right? And so it's about destroying cultural capital and seizing the production of cultural capital, if you will, is the way they think about issues like these. And so I do think that Yang's approach of sidestepping these social wedge issues, of trying not to alienate either side, is the right way to go. But I think that if he wants to do it better, and if our movement wants to do it better, we need to understand why not just far left people, but even just mainstream Democrats who frankly might actually even be center or center right on economic issues are still nevertheless very, very turned off by a grievance. The combination of working class grievance with these identity politics issues like white culture and so forth. And they're not wrong to be turned off by that. That is a really gross thing. And I think that the far left, it does have a tendency to forgive bad behavior on the grounds that, oh, well, working class people are all oppressed and therefore, you can't hold them accountable for their despicable worldviews. So Yang is right that we need to do something in order to reach the white working class in this country. And I think that that shouldn't be a matter of pandering to their racism, sexism, and homophobia. That's what Trump did, and it worked. But what it could be is a matter of just not talking about those issues. Don't make the race about those issues. Make the race about kitchen table issues. Make the race about having a healthier economy and an economy that works for everybody.
And I don't think there should even be a question about whether or not that's the right choice, because if they're willing to throw Bernie Sanders under the bus, they don't like they don't have any voice at that point. Like who is championing your cause in the mainstream and political establishment at this point? It is so far out there that it's bizarre to me. We really need to get down and like the question exists of what are we going to do in the next 2 years, whether we have have control over the Senate or not, to somehow deal with this incredibly polarized society we find ourselves in, looking at the final tally of numbers, to keep pushing our country forward and not fall back into this quagmire of getting so close to authoritarianism, because that could very well pop up again in 2022. And the main thing right now is Trump is trying to do whatever he can to, like, we're going to take it to the courts and everything. He's so incompetent. That has been one word that has stayed through for the last 4 years is incompetence. His lawyers can't do anything. He's not going to succeed. The best that he'll be able to do is just try and rally people up. Like, it's over. It's done. He's the weakest dictator I've ever seen attempting to try and take control. But the problem is, whoever comes down in 2 years or 4 years who's been looking at what Trump did and has been studying it, like, that is a huge issue. We have to do something right now. So what do we do?
Well, Andrew Sullivan made a really interesting observation about Trump, where he said basically Trump is not as effectively evil as he could be. And that's actually ironically because he doesn't have any good qualities. In order to be an effective evil dictator, you have to believe in something bigger than yourself. You have to believe in some ideology that you're trying to accomplish, some great, ethno-state utopia or communist utopia or whatever it is you're trying to create. And a lot of Trump's supporters believe in that, but all Donald Trump believes in is himself. He is so caught up in just himself looking good and his brand and winning kind of winning the moment in the media. It's like a goldfish. He's not focused on the future. He has no long-term strategy. But he's so focused on himself that he doesn't have the attention and the dedication necessary in order to push through some kind of evil agenda. He was more of a bull in the china shop, which does not help anybody. It doesn't even help Trump's own supporters. Really, all it helps is America's enemies abroad, which is why the Russians like Trump, because it's chaos. Chaos is when chaos in America is good for America's enemies. And that's all that 4 years of Donald Trump accomplished, was turning Americans against one another in a bunch of chaos. So what scares me is that, as bad as that is, and that is indeed very bad, and 4 more years of it could have broken our system for all I know. But what could be worse is if you have somebody like Trump who is able to appeal to grievance politics, able to appeal to white identity politics, and wrap it all up in that bow, and then once taking power and creating a cult of personality around themselves, use it to actually achieve a coherent vision of evil. That would be far, far, far worse. And so what I think we need to do is, frankly, I think liberal elites who are still in charge of the Democratic Party and to some extent still in charge of the Republican Party, again, using liberal in the broad political science definition of it, not in the American sense of it being a colloquialism for the left. What needs to happen is people like Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney need to take the party back from Donald Trump, right? And even some of the ones who were like Marco Rubio, pandered to Trump a lot, pandered to his voters a lot, tried to help Trump get reelected. But Marco Rubio is a total moderate on immigration, for example, right? Paul Ryan and Rubio and Romney are all much more in favor of free market economics and much more in favor of a return to the bipartisan consensus on foreign policy that we've had since World War II. So the elites, the liberal elites, are going to get their way in both parties for the next 4 years. And that is a good thing if you believe in their worldview, as I do. But it's a bad thing if what happens is it means that they forget about the threat of the Trump voters. They forget about the threat of the alt-right and the far left radicals who hate the liberal elite establishment with a fiery passion. if they forget about that threat and just, you know, get their way for 4 years without any intent, without any attempt to actually de-radicalize those people by doing something like UBI, then we could be in for something even worse than Trump 4 years from now.
Ugh,
So
yeah.
that would be my big takeaway. It's like, okay, you know, my side won. Now what my side needs to do is it needs to actually get some things done for regular people so that we can win again.
Marco Rubio just yesterday tweeted out in response to a picture of people celebrating on Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, D.C. A whole bunch of people, admittedly, too crowded together during a pandemic. I'll admit that. That being said, every single one of them was wearing a mask. Every single one of them. It's, you know, at least it's 50% of the way there. If you had a Trump rally, you wouldn't have anything. And he says, shouldn't we be making sure that these people are not trying to spread the pain? Like, he said something along the lines, you know, he's clearly trying to criticize these people celebrating in jubilation that the 4 years of hell that they've experienced is now over. And he's immediately like, now he's flipped over. Suddenly the pandemic matters, right? And we're about to see this. This is the big fear. We don't get the Senate, and all of a sudden, all the Republicans now suddenly care about the deficit. They now suddenly care about debt. They're now going to suddenly care about the pandemic. You're going to have nothing but obstruction, and all that like I'm sitting there.
And a lot of those Trump voters are suddenly going to think that the pandemic is real too, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Is that this is the problem of radicalization? Is it politicizes things that shouldn't be political. So yeah, that's frankly, I mean, if you want to know what I think about social issues, because we kept talking about, I prefer to simplify things and talk about, you know, the economic right and the economic left, which I see basically as capitalism and communism / socialism / fascism, all on the left, in my opinion, versus, you know, liberal democracy and capitalism on the right. That's the way I like to look at it. But that's because I think that all of these social issues are things that the government should stay out of. I think that the government should protect individuals' rights. The government should protect people from, you know, being hurt by other people on the basis of social issues. But it shouldn't be enforcing one person's set of preferences. You know, like as the old saying goes, like, if you don't like interracial marriage, then don't marry someone of another race, you know. Mm-hmm. You don't have to force everybody else to do it too. That's where the problem. So when the authoritarianism comes in, that it becomes a problem. Yeah. I mean, that, and also, if you don't like interracial marriage, you're racist and I'm not going to be your friend. But, you know, it's a free country. You have a right to be racist as long as you don't act on it.
I find myself in agreement, right? And that's another thing that came up is during Hassan's stream is Bernie says working class, but you think about all these things that will affect the working class are also going to affect white people. Like, we're not going to, in some world that universal health care passes, universal health care is going to go to racists. You can't exclude racists out from that. No matter what you feel about it. And like I posted this picture.
UBI too.
UBI will go to racists. The thing is we're going to outnumber that group, and just because they exist doesn't mean that you can like suddenly expand and say, well, we don't want white people in totality to even get anything like that. That is extremely problematic in my view. And to really deal with the issues, you're going to have like universality in the case of basic income, especially you don't sit back and fall down to these these divisions. And that is what Marco Rubio's tweet to me only stood for. Marco Rubio is here to divide.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not. I when I say that I want people like Rubio and Ryan and Romney, the 3 R's.
Right.
When I say I want people like that to take control again, it's not because I'm giving them a pass for the extent to which they pandered to Trump. Romney was pretty outspoken against Trump, and all 3 of those guys were for part of their part of this. This awful experiment in Trumpism. So I think it's important that we hold people accountable for the awful things that they did and said in defense of Donald Trump. I don't think they should get a free pass on that. But I also think that if we really want the Republican Party to be able to heal itself and move past this Trumpist nightmare, then at some point, we need to give credit to people who are willing to lead the way to doing that, even if, you know, it doesn't mean giving them a free pass on their mistakes, but it does mean you at least have to start recognizing when they're doing better. Because, you know, anybody who thinks that we're going to vote out and replace every single Trump supporting Republican in Congress is crazy. That's not going to happen. What will happen, though, is that a lot of people who were Trump supporting Republicans will now start to distance themselves from Trump and start distancing themselves from Trumpism. And no, we shouldn't give them a free pass, but also, frankly, we should welcome that.
Right. And I should have explicitly kind of said it beforehand too. I mean, with Rubio specifically, and we're going to take a look at this. We're going to take a look at the demographic shift, the ways that the demographics completely baffled pollsters in so many different ways. But Rubio could be poised as someone to take advantage of the changing demographics in the country, demographics which by no means are just destined to become more and more blue. Like we know that for a fact today. And it bothered me to see him, like, after the election, what does he decide to do? It's like, well, we're going to go back to divisiveness. And the more that these Republicans who have an opportunity to lead forward in their party choose that path, the more likely it is that we get to Trump 2.0 in the future. That may be my view, but you as an ex-Republican, I am interested to know how you feel moving forward. How does the party that you came from, how does that look in your mind? What would you like to see? What are you afraid of happening?
Well, I was hoping that it would be more of a blowout against Trump, because if it was, then they would have an easier time distancing themselves from Trump faster. But we're already starting to see a little distancing happening. At a bare minimum, you're starting to see people like Lisa Murkowski, who was never really willing to say much of anything negative about Trump. Apart from like, oh, I hope he learns his lesson when he doesn't get removed after impeachment, and I didn't vote to remove him, right? Starting to see people like that say, Joe Biden is the president-elect. I look forward to working with his administration. You saw Fox News actually called Arizona and then called the race for Biden when Biden clearly had the win in Pennsylvania. So you are seeing a lot of establishment Republicans who were willing to pander to Trump and pander to his voters in order to get their way on certain things like tax cuts for the super rich, not for the middle class. You're starting to see those people distance themselves from Trump already. So I want to see more of that. I registered as a Democrat because I couldn't be part of the Republican Party when it became a National Socialist Party. For me, it wasn't just a matter about not liking Trump's personality. I think that they moved hard left on trade and foreign policy, which are issues that I care about, even if most Americans don't. And so now that we've elected Biden, which I'm really happy with, and who I consider to be the actual right-wing candidate on those issues, at least.
And you're right. You are right on that.
I think that's a good thing, but I think I might actually switch back to Republican just so that I can try to influence the Republican primary next time around. And yeah, I will be looking for the most un-Trump-like person in the primary and backing them.
That's very interesting. Do you have any idea of what that could look like?
Yeah, I mean, if I could create an ideal Republican candidate, it would be somebody who is unapologetically globalist in the sense of being in favor of free trade, and not in any way a nationalist. Not in the way that Trump supporters are nationalists. I mean, technically, the definition of a nationalist is someone who believes in a nation state, and we're all nationalists in that sense. But in the sense that Trump voters are against globalism. And, of course, they equate it with like evil global Jewish conspiracies and all of this crazy. Yeah, absolutely bonkers, crazy shit. America First was a slogan used by Nazi sympathizers leading up to World War II. That's the group of people we're talking about: protectionism and isolationism, which until very recently was something that only existed on the radical left, like far left of the Democratic Party, radical left. So I would like to see somebody who says, no, we're Republicans believe in free trade capitalism. We believe in trading with other countries. Obviously, we should come down hard on countries that violate international trade law. But the way to do that is to work with our democratic allies to collectively cut countries like China out, to force them to behave. We can't do it unilaterally. It makes no sense to have trade war with Canada or the UK. That's absolutely insane, So we need to return to free trade. We need to return to a what some people call a neoconservative foreign policy, which is about standing up for democracies around the world, standing up against dictatorships. I understand that sometimes we have done and said things that were bad under that banner, but this, kind of like people say, well, democracy, democracies often get things wrong too. That doesn't mean that you give up on democracy. It means that you have to, change your strategy. So I'd like to see the Republican Party return to being more of the kind of Reagan style of foreign policy, which is basically, we are going to actively work with our allies to ensure that communists and other dictatorships around the world all fail and try to spread democracy. And then finally, I would like to see on social issues, I'd like to see the Republicans moderate somewhat on that. And I think that it's going to be, in the short term, it's going to be a bit of a balancing act, because on the one hand, they need to assure economically right-wing voters in California and New York and up and down the coast in general, they need to reassure them that, we're not continuing down that theocratic path. We believe in individual liberty. But on the other hand, they also can't yet afford to alienate the more socially conservative, or I would prefer to say socially regressive or theocratic voters in the middle of the country too much right away, because it's not like they're suddenly going to start winning the electoral college on the coast overnight, right? That's going to be a process. So they're going to have to play both sides of that for a little while. And I think the way to do that is to say, we respect your individual religious beliefs, but like the United States government, we have the First Amendment. Basically they need to play the separation of church and state card, and they need to say, like, we are in favor of individual liberty. We are in favor of respecting everybody's individual rights to their own personal beliefs on social matters, and leave it at that. Like, stay away from social issues as much as they can, make it about economics, and then finally embrace a right-wing form of UBI, which I have outlined on movingforwardpod.com. That would be my ideal candidate. Oh, and also in favor of legal immigration, expanding and making it easier for people to immigrate legally while simultaneously cracking down on illegal immigration, which is a huge difference from Trump's movement, where they're actually just against brown people coming here legally or otherwise.
Right. And they're well, okay, I won't get into that. But okay, this is very interesting. Do we find ourselves in a situation where the right and the left both have within them two dueling interests, right? You've got on the progressive side, on the left side, the progressives and the moderates, and then what you just outlined on the right. Like, how is that the dynamic that we're moving forward with?
What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, so it was not a repudiation of Trump, but it also doesn't mean, this election was not a repudiation of Trump, but it also doesn't mean that Trumpism has to be whatever is pushed forward in the years to come. Do you think that what you outlined and what you wanted to see in the Republican Party, is that a long shot, or do you think that there's a real possibility of that kind of republicanism happening?
I actually think there is a possibility, and the reason for that is because if you look at how Trump won the primary, he had a lot of advantages in the sense that he was a hugely famous figure. More people knew his name. They'd seen him on TV. They believed in this kind of cultivated persona of Trump as supposedly this great businessman and all of this stuff. And so he had that going for him. But even there, the reason he was able to run away with it in the Republican primary is because it was a wide field. And normal Republicans were divided between, 24 other candidates. And so even though Trump's enthusiastic base in the primary was only about a third of Republican voters, he was able to run away with it, which is, by the way, what Bernie Sanders almost did. And the Democrats learned from that. You saw it happen when Biden won South Carolina. Everybody dropped out and endorsed Biden, right? If the Republicans had done that earlier on in the primary, and this was very early on in the primary in the Democrats' case, if the Republicans had done that after Trump won one or two states, there's no way he would have won the primary. So I'm hoping the Republicans learned that lesson. I am hoping that there will be gatekeepers in the party who will say, if you're left of the Democrats on trade and foreign policy, we're not even going to let you run in the first place. And then on top of that, they need to make sure that that you don't have a wide field of moderates and actual right wingers as opposed to alt-right neo-Nazis. You want to make sure that those people are prepared to drop out and endorse somebody. So if they do that, and if enough voters are like, yeah, yeah, Trump kind of barely won the first time, but then he kind of got his ass kicked the second time. Maybe, I could see a lot of voters saying maybe we need to try something different. But in terms of the Republican Party suddenly being able to win on the coasts because they moderated on social issues, that's a long shot and a long game, which is why I said they can't afford to alienate the people in the middle of the country right away. They need to start turning some of the states on the coast a little bit more purple, while keeping enough of the states in the middle of the country. And that's going to be a challenge for sure. But do I think somebody kind of like what I outlined could win a primary? Yeah. Even with a UBI, it's possible. Universal basic income actually polls pretty well with Republicans.
It's very interesting. Those are some very interesting dynamics. Returning back to the election that just happened within this week, it sounds like we both kind of agree, and I'm kind of happy about this. I expected that we might have spent some time talking about like what is Trump going to try and do, what possibly might happen. Can he muddy the waters any more than he already has? It sounds like we both kind of agree that this is just not going to happen. If violence in the streets haven't erupted yet, it's unlikely to happen in the days and weeks to come. What is going to happen to Trump? Is he is he done? I don't think so. What do you have to say about that?
I don't know. I mean, I will be a little bit surprised if he actually does a graceful concession speech in the next few days, even though that is absolutely what any other politician would do under these circumstances. But I won't be totally surprised if he does it. I think that if like his family, like say Jared Kushner, is able to persuade him to do it, the way they will persuade him, and Jared, if you're listening, this is what you should tell Trump. You should say, hey, look, it was really close. You can go out there and honestly say it really just came down to a few thousand votes in a few swing states. You can honestly say that you got, a lot of votes, possibly the largest number of votes for an incumbent in history, even though it's still smaller than the number of votes that Biden got. Give him an out where he can save his, where he can kind of like save his ego, right? But also concede. And you have to give Trump like a way to go in the future, right? So he has to be able to tell people like, okay, we lost, but I'm starting Trump TV and I'm going to keep this MAGA movement alive, and we're going to run somebody else next time around. Probably won't be me, but we're going to run somebody else next time around. If they can persuade Trump to do that, and that he's going to make billions of dollars on this media empire due to his enormous cult following, that's all he really ever cared about, frankly. I don't think he actually cares about being president or doing anything as president beyond making money and fame for himself. And also, here's a key thing. He'll be able to do all of that stuff without the constant attacks of the evil liberal media, right? Because, now he won't be president anymore, so he won't be as much under the microscope. He'll be able to just get away with spreading his conspiracy theories and making money on it. And he'll someday soon, he'll even maybe be able to walk down the street in Manhattan without getting egged again.
So yeah, that is a pretty popular narrative that we've heard over the past 4 years. So that kind of puts us up between two dueling possibilities. One is the possibility that you're having to bet on his ego, and this is why I'm so fascinated by his niece's Mary Trump's book about her uncle, which goes into his pathological narcissism. And someone in my chat said something, and I am looking at everyone's comments, and after the stream is over, I want to go through and talk about everything because I've seen some interesting things. But is he such a malignant narcissist that he, even though he has this opportunity that I fully expect is there for him, Trump TV, right? He's going to, especially considering how people are now turning against Fox News and they're rioting, or not rioting, but protesting and saying Fox News sucks. These Republicans who are mad that they called Arizona. He's got the opportunity to create his own news network and salvage what little is left of his empire. Because he was, from what I've heard, he had to salvage after his casino downfall. That's when he started doing The Apprentice, and that's what kept him going, and it's all about TV now. That would be the predictable choice for him to make. Or is his niece's description and analysis of his psychological condition more accurate than a lot of us seem to think it is? And is he really going to like take this to some next degree? Is he going to push some red buttons in the next month and a half up to the day of inauguration? Is he going to burn things on the way out? His current actions, the tweets and things that he's done since the election, since it was called, seems to suggest that is an extreme possibility. Mm-hmm. It's hard to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, that also wouldn't surprise me, right? I think it might actually surprise me less than him giving a graceful concession speech, even though, as I said, I wouldn't be terribly surprised if he did that for the reasons I just articulated. The problem is there's no way for him to concede without giving up on the conspiracy theory that it was stolen from him. That said, even if he kind of has to walk that back for a second in order to give a credible concession speech, there's nothing stopping him from contradicting himself, in the next minute afterward and continuing to spread, oh, I don't know, the more I look into it, it looks like this really was stolen. You know what I mean? So I would expect Trump TV to take advantage of the Fexit. God, that sounds awful. Fox News exit. And one way you could do that is to say, like, come over here. We're fighting the fight against the evil liberal establishment, which stole our democracy from us. And essentially become like Alex Jones, but like ratcheted it up by 1 billion times. I absolutely could see him doing that with or without a concession speech. But you're right. I mean, Mary Trump's point is that he can never admit to himself or to others that he actually lost. And so it may just be psychologically impossible for him to give a concession speech. He may just continue to say, like, to take it right up until the moment that he's forced out of the White House, that he never really lost. That wouldn't surprise me. And if that led to some violence and other kinds of instability, that wouldn't surprise me. We'll see. Will he I don't know, will he suddenly like nuke cavalry or something like that? God, I think that if people in the White House were worried about him doing that on his way out of the White House just because he's unhinged, that might actually be what it takes to get the 25th Amendment. Yeah. That might, you know what I mean? Anything short of he's going to start a nuclear holocaust and kill, 9/10 of Americans as a consequence of it. Anything short of that, don't expect his people to stand up to him between now and Biden taking office, though.
Yeah, there's a lot to touch on there. I mean, a lot of people like to think that executive power has so much capability, but there's someone holding the football, and they can say, no, I'm going to walk away from this. There's the story of the how nuclear holocaust was avoided in the 70s or 80s because of a Soviet Union officer who said, I think this radar is telling us incorrect information, and he made the decision not to pass it on to his higher ups. People can flat out just say, no, you lost the election. If you try anything crazy or absurd, we're going to take the ball and go home. Like that is absolutely what would happen at this point. I'm not concerned about that in the slightest. I have to
believe that's what would happen. Otherwise, I couldn't sleep at night until Trump's out.
Yeah, because right.
He's a deranged lunatic capable of almost anything.
Yeah, and just to address one of the claims in my chat is Mary Trump is a political jab artist. Her entire analysis of Trump very well could be some way for her to make money. But no, if you truly do understand textbook narcissism, pathological narcissism, you have to understand that this is a true thing. This is pathology. There is something wrong, and it's also a predictable pathology. You can expect how someone can react in some way. So yeah, Mary, if she's wrong, then we've got no concerns. And she was just doing it to make a quick buck. And really, at the end of the day, Trump is just a reality TV mogul who takes it to the extreme. But ultimately,
I think it's probably both. I think Mary is sincere. Mm-hmm. I think she's sincere, and she also wanted to make money, right? But I'm not a lefty, so I don't hold it against people when they want to make money.
Right. Yeah. That's
no reason. That's no reason to doubt the truth of what she said.
Good point.
I believe she thinks what she said is true.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Again, it's always a little somewhere in the middle. That's true. So that's what we have to look out for in the days to come. It's fair to say that at any other point in history, we would have had a concession speech by now. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, this is absolutely insane. Yeah. This is terrible. I mean, we haven't been this divided and this close to political violence on a mass scale in this country since the actual Civil War. It's not nearly that bad yet, but could Trump ratchet it up to the point where it gets closer between now and him leaving? Absolutely. Is it going to result in a full-on civil war? No, it won't. Even if he takes it to his grave that he had the election stolen from him, no, I don't think it's going to lead to a full civil war over this one election.
And this is why
we might see, you know, like some more white terrorism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the most common form of domestic terrorism during the Trump years has been coming from the radical alt-right, basically racist white people. So yeah, I think I could see a little bit of that happening. I could see people going after Joe Biden. I could see somebody trying to take him out even before he's sworn in.
The correct term is Al-Qaeda.
Al-Qaeda, yeah, absolutely. The American Taliban, and remember, the actual Taliban also endorsed them.
Vanilla ISIS is another one that I've heard. Well, that's the thing.
Does Vanilla? I mean, I guess Vanilla Ice was white, but like, is his audience? I guess his audience was kind of white, huh?
Yeah, significantly so. Yeah, the baggy pants and everything.
He doesn't have the real cred.
Yeah, like listen, you look at pictures of ISIS in their trucks with the flags blowing in the wind behind them, and then you take a look at the caravans of Trump supporters on the road. A lot of people earlier in the year like to say, "Oh, these people are they've got Trump derangement syndrome because they're talking about how we're sliding towards authoritarianism, and they're listening to the radical mainstream media who are just trying to disparage Trump and cancel his presidency." No, listen, and back to your point on foreign policy, the most damage that has ever happened to America on the world stage has happened in the last week and a half, in the way that Trump has disparaged and continually tried to dismantle faith in our electoral system, in our elections. And just today, just a couple hours ago, he's posting about, since when does the media call the elections? Like, he doesn't understand how voting in this country works. He fundamentally does not understand it. And even though he doesn't know anything about it, he's more than willing to try and tear it apart.
If the media had prematurely called it for him on election night,
he'd be happy.
Right? He not only would he be happy, but he'd say like, okay, it's over. No need to keep counting any votes.
Yep.
I mean, he said to stop counting the votes anyway, you know?
Oh yeah. Like, he's not contesting any of the flipped house seats.
He doesn't have a problem with the media calling it. He has a problem with the media calling it for his opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And of course, I mean, obviously legally, you know, CNN and NBC and Fox News have no legal authority to declare somebody the president-elect. That has to happen. You know, states are going to count it, and then the states will report, and then the electors will vote. And then at that time, Joe Biden will officially become the president-elect. But that doesn't, you know, that's, you know, it's just dishonest for Trump to pretend like he has a problem with the media calling it, because they called it for him last time around and Hillary Clinton conceded that day. That's the thing. It's like, you don't have to go through the big technical process if the opponent actually concedes. That would be a real thing. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know what to say about it.
Well, that brings us full circle back to the education problem that you brought up earlier on. The people who voted for him are not, they like, and I asked a red-leaning family, a MAGA family member, like, what do you think happens on election night? And he says, in every single election that's ever happened, it's been called on election night, except for 2000 with the hanging chads. I remember the hanging chads and everything. I'm like, no, it's never been called. The election doesn't happen until the electoral votes arrive in December. The media also, just projects the winner. Also, how do they think it happened
before television and the radio?
Right. They don't understand how it actually works. And it's that is testament to how much we've failed educational funding in this country for decades. Good Lord. So that's where we find ourselves at that point. It's a little bizarre to me, but you know, Rio, we find ourselves here probably a little bit close to an hour on in the conversation. I want to make sure that we cover a lot of the core conversations concerning the election itself. What are some of the things that you wanted to make sure to hit on?
Well, I mean, we talked a little bit about how the Democrats made it all too easy for Trump to terrify people, right? I mean, we had a very high voter turnout on both sides of this election, and a lot of people were enthusiastically voting for Trump, but not 70 million of them. some percentage of those people were enthusiastically voting against the, Antifa Marxist takeover of America, right? And they were willing to do so even though they don't particularly like Trump, right? That is the demographic that the Democrats need to focus on winning back. You're not going to get back the hardcore Trump voters, but you can get those people who looked at Trump and said, what a shit show, and then looked at Biden and said, oh, what a puppet of a different shit show. We need to reach those people. And so part of that is, look, Florida, Trump got like something like 70% of the Cuban vote in Florida. Well, as it turns out, people whose families fled from communism aren't super excited about a party that's cozying up to people who call themselves socialists. And like it or not, most Americans of all races and all classes don't pay a lot of attention to the detail of policy, et cetera, right? They're not all experts on political science. They don't understand that democratic socialism is different from social democracy, and that even though Bernie Sanders and AOC call themselves democratic socialists, they actually are, their policies are actually social democracy. They don't understand any of that. All they know is they see a Democratic Party almost nominate a socialist twice, right? And they see a bunch of people, a bunch of far lefties in deep blue districts celebrating AOC as the great future of the party, right? That's why 70% of Cubans in Florida voted against the Democrats. That is the reason why, right? And it's not just them. It's immigrants from Venezuela, and Trump outperformed his previous numbers with African Americans, with people of color in general. He was actually saved by basically relatively affluent and college-educated white people in the suburbs, especially women. They were able to, in swing states, they were able to make up for the people of color. Of course, the majority of people of color still voted Democrat, but the point being, they took that group of people for granted, and they lost some of them. And they probably lost Florida as a consequence of it. They might have turned Texas blue otherwise. There are a lot of Latinos in Texas, and most of them voted for the Democrat, but not all of them. Enough of them voted for Trump, and his numbers with Latinos were better this time than last time. And the Democrats need to ask themselves, is it worth alienating, like a lot of black voters, including black working class voters? A lot of them aren't super keen on socialism either. They don't want the government to, take over, seize the means of production and tell them what kind of job they're going to do in order to be able to have housing and food. They just want a fair shot at the American dream through the capitalist system.
Yep.
Truly. That's what most of them want. And it's basically, I think the Democratic Party needs to tell the Bernie Bolsheviks and the neo-Marxist identity politics, social justice warrior brigade, to take a back seat at a minimum, or take a hike, if possible, but we'll see. If the Democrats do that, then maybe they'll become like a new pro-capitalist, pro-liberal democracy party, and then the Republicans they'll triple down on National Socialism, and they'll keep getting some of those. Ironically. The thing a lot of people need to keep in mind is, especially working class voters who think of themselves as against socialism, they're against socialism as a word, as a concept, but they're actually okay with certain socialist policies if it's benefiting them, right? And as long as it's not called socialism.
In Florida, they voted for a $15 an hour minimum wage.
Get out of the business of pandering to anybody on the social wedge issues and just talk about specific solutions that make the economy work better for regular people, and don't call it socialist.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm in full agreement with you. Like, even in the Midwest, look at the numbers. Trump you don't know how many stories I heard about all these white women, these middle-aged white women and Gen X white women who were going to Panera group gatherings, and we were going to see this huge turnout from all the women who were mistaken by their husbands in 2016 to vote for Trump. And now we're going to see them turn back. He actually increased his voter turnout among white women by 3%. Or I think 2%. I need to double check the number on that. He increased the turnout among white women. So there is absolutely, undeniably something extremely wrong with Democratic messaging, and we cannot have more of the same. They cannot have more
something
of the
we
same.
need to keep in mind there, though, is that because turnout overall on both sides was higher, a lot of people increased their numbers. Like, a lot of people's numbers increased in a number of ways because the overall numbers just increased, right? But like, especially among like college educated white voters, I think that Trump in the end, he had to lose because of some people, I think that both sides got a lot of people who didn't vote last time to vote for them. And it'll be interesting as all the hard data comes in to tease apart the difference between that and their overall percentage of different demographics and so forth. But, and that's the other thing I'm leaving out of this is that actually Joe Biden performed much better with white working class voters than Hillary Clinton did. And we always thought he would, because he speaks like them, he knows Hillary Clinton came from like kind of a upper middle class background and then became obscenely wealthy. Joe Biden came from a working class background and became well off, big difference in terms of his appeal to, regular people in the middle of the country. So I think Biden, it was just a lot of people voted. It was a really, really, really high turnout on both sides.
Yeah, up until this point, we've heard when turnout is high, it's automatically good for Democrats. But that is not true. It's when turnout is high, it just more than likely not turns out well for Democrats. The other side apparently has just never had anyone to turn out for, and now they got that. And you're right, when turnout was just so high, there were more areas in the country where the numbers just could not add up in Democrats' favors. And that's where we find ourselves in.
You hit the nail on the head. That's right. There are a lot of people in the country who pollsters didn't adequately account for because they haven't voted before. They waited for it after the last time. They didn't wait enough for it. And yeah, that's what it is. A lot of people felt like they didn't have a real champion in Washington until Trump came along. And, that's kind of gross,
That's that's where
I don't know. Like I kind of feel like maybe they shouldn't have a champion if what they want is Donald Trump. But I think that Yang has a strategy for how to reach some of those people without all of the nastiness that Trump went down. Because like one strategy for reaching them is to really pander to them on those social issues. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that another way to reach them is to just tell people, we know these are stupid wedge issues. The government should stay out of that anyway. Now, let's talk about how the economy is going to work for regular people under my policies. That hopefully Yang's right about that.
And Yang is putting his money where his mouth is. He always has. He's moving to Georgia, and I was looking at on the top of Reddit, the top post of Our Politics before we started this stream was a headline about him doing just that, and all of the responses are people who are saying things like, well, I wasn't too sure on Yang. I thought he was an opportunist, blah blah blah. The response to his actions right now are extremely positive. Every single time he does, he's analytical. I know I'm going to sound like a fanboy here, and granted I am, but he's a strategic tactician, and he does extremely well moving forward. We have not heard the last of him. Ideally, Biden's going to understand this, and I've heard conflicting information. He needs some role in the administration going forward. He's a voice that needs to be heard. And just as anecdotally, that's what I'm hearing upon more and more people looking at what Yang's doing. And that is great optics moving forward. I suppose to wrap up the episode, because I don't want it to drag on a little too long. We could even do a part 2 if that may be necessary, because there's a lot to talk about. But my hopes looking forward, because we can easily find ourselves in a realm of negativity, is that we have to do something that breaks the boundaries of all of this ideological back and forth, mumble words and this and socialism and capitalism. We have to do something that reaches a majority of people and says, hey, this is an institution. This is a democratic institution that has made your life better. You are like the big question that Reagan asked is, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago. We have to boil this down to that and stop asking anything else. That is the thing to focus on. And really, I can only see that as a universal basic income. And we have to use the response to COVID as our
and
initiative.
Also, universal basic income has to be sold as a centrist policy.
The freedom dividend, really.
It has to be sold as simultaneously reaching people who are being falling through the cracks of our existing welfare system because for whatever reason they can't qualify, even though they need it. Right.
Today.
But also at the same time, getting people off welfare and back into the job market. Right. Because it's not means tested and therefore they can keep it while working. And also simultaneously, essentially tax relief for the middle class. Right. Because the middle class is not fitting the bill for it, which means it has to be funded by a VAT. It has to not stack on welfare, and it has to not be means tested. It also needs to be sold as a stimulus of the economy that will create jobs, that will put money directly into local dying ghost towns around the country and turn them into thriving metropolises of their own. They'll still be small towns, right? Don't make them think that you want to turn everything into Brooklyn, right? They'll still be small towns, but like people will be able to buy coffee because they'll have money to buy coffee. And then people will be able to start coffee shops because they'll have money to start coffee shops. And then people will be able to be employed working in coffee shops because now there's coffee shops for them to work at. And on top of it, they themselves have a UBI on top of their wages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It needs to be sold as stimulus, tax relief, and welfare reform. It needs to be sold as a centrist policy. A centrist policy. If we do that, then we can bring people together. But if, the far left ruins it by saying, no, it has to stack on welfare and we have to fund it with a land value tax. Land value tax, that means you're going to be taxing people who are land rich and cash poor in these, and you're going to make their lives even worse, right? Or hiking the taxes on the middle class. Okay, well, if you hike taxes on the middle class in order to pay for it, then you're just taking money from one pocket and putting it in the other pocket. It's no good. It's no good for them. And that's just going to continue to perpetuate the current class warfare and identity politics warfare that we have right now. Yes, white people are more likely to own their homes. Okay. If you hate white people, and you hate homeowners, then you should tax the hell out of homeowners. I actually see people on the left saying things like home ownership is bad. No, home ownership is good. The solution should be to help more people own their homes, right? And if rents are too high, help more people invest in rentals so that the supply of rentals goes up. So more people are buying homes. That means fewer renters, right? More people are buying their own homes that they're living in. So fewer renters, the demand for rentals goes down. And then at the same time, more people can afford to invest in rental properties, which means the supply of rentals goes up. That means rents go down. More people owning homes is a good thing, not a bad thing. We sell it as a centrist policy. Then you can start to heal this country.
So, I think it's important to be clear on this point that when I arrived at a universal basic income, I had come to the understanding that wealth redistribution is important, whether that be in the traditional market as we know it, in income, in wages. It's important that people make money. And if you, in the absence of that, in a labor market in which automation or globalization and outsourcing reduces the flow of money from the top to the bottom in a fundamental and utilitarian way, that's going to cause societal rot and decay. Redistribution is necessary, and we found ourselves in this place in society where wealth redistribution is socialism, and to some degree it may or may not be. I don't know. Again, we shouldn't get so caught up in this. If we are going to do this correctly, the redistribution of wealth cannot be something that divides the working class, and the working class is more than just the poor. If it is something that puts an extra burden, right? The entire reason why it works in Alaska with the Alaska Permanent Fund is that it is not viewed in a moral lens as, oh, well, that person who doesn't have a job or something is getting this money and it's coming out of my paycheck. No, it's viewed in a pragmatic lens, as in, yeah, he's getting that money, but so am I. I got the check too. I'm less concerned about what he's doing with his money.
Honestly, I would not call it socialist. I'd call it human capitalism. And I would stay away from calling it redistribution. Right?
Yeah.
I would talk about tax relief for the middle class. I'd talk about welfare reform to help people get off welfare and become gainfully employed. I'd talk about helping people become homeowners. I'd talk about stimulating local small businesses and creating jobs. That's how you sell the policy. And, in a Democratic primary, maybe Yang would have done better if he had tried that. I don't know. But in a general election, that is 100% how you sell the policy. Stay away from the socialist word. Stay away from the redistribution word. We can have arguments till the cows come home about whether or not it is or isn't socialist. I mean, by a broad enough definition, public roads are a socialist, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
So like, let's move past the semantics on that. The bottom line is capitalism as a word pulls very high with Democrats, Republicans, and independents, and socialism does not. Okay.
Yeah. The point that I'm
like, the left is really good at losing. They're like experts at it at this point.
More importantly, the point that I'm making is that the end result needs to be pragmatic, or else you will not succeed. And that's the danger, is then it's a failure, and that's the last thing that we can manage. And but going forward from there as well, like, use a real life example. There are many stories. Tens of thousands of people who have gone on unemployment since this pandemic began are now getting calls from their state unemployment system saying, oh, well, there was a paperwork error and you need to give us the $12,000 that you got since March. And like, people are now becoming devastated. They have the option of trying to say to the courts and everything, well, I actually needed this money, and they very well might win and everything. But now they've got to get a lawyer, and now they've got to, it's turning into this quagmire of a mess that means tested welfare always kind of results in. So, like, listen, Biden needs to get up and he needs to say, look, we see these stories happening, and that's not right. You need the money because this is a crisis. So we are going to fix this. We're going to put cash in the communities who are negatively affected by this because it's your money. And then whatever the proper messaging that you just mentioned should come into play. This is crucial. And
also, frankly, take a look at, there's a chart that shows like, imagine if what a line would look like if everybody in the US had exactly the same amount of wealth and income, right? It would be a flat horizontal line, like from poorest to richest would be the same, right? Okay. And then you look at what the actual economy looks like. It's more like this, right? Some people have more, some people have less. Okay. Now, what our existing tax and spend welfare state does is it takes the bottom 9/10 or so of that line and it makes it more like that. Okay. But it does it by taking money from from like the 50th percentile to like the 90th percentile and giving it to people down here, right? So it's reducing the amount of wealth that the middle class has, shrinking the middle class, in other words, while bringing people up on the bottom. Now,
and failing to do so.
Yeah, bringing everybody up is a good thing, but here's what a UBI would do. It would go back to this again. Okay. Now, it's important to point out that here it may look more equitable, but everybody actually has less money. Under a UBI, it would look more like a meritocratic capitalist system where, once again, people at the top actually have more and people at the bottom actually have less, even though they all have more than they would otherwise.
Right. They actually have more.
But the left is so obsessed with equity and flattening out that line that they do policies that shrink the middle class and trap people in poverty. As long as the line is flat. And remember when I said it's just the bottom 90%, the top 10% under our current system goes, right? And so you want to talk about, it's not about the divide between the super rich and the poor. It's about the divide between the middle and the poor versus the super rich. Right. That's the real thing. That's the real thing. We need policies that are going to grow the middle class and end poverty. That should be our goal.
Yes.
And if the way to do that is to take money from the obscenely rich people like Jeff Bezos and Donald Trump who don't pay taxes, right?
Right.
Not to take them from normal people like you and me, right? That's the thing, right? And so, means testing it because, oh my God, a family that makes $100,000 a year might get $24,000 of their taxes back. Okay, well, those people are already paying more than that in taxes now anyway, right? Maybe they would about break even, if that. Is that such a bad thing?
Yeah, there are so many people.
If they can afford to like send their kid to college without going into debt, is that such a bad thing? If they can afford to maybe invest in the stock market, right? Or open a wine shop downtown? Is that such a bad thing, really? Or buy a couple of rentals so that the supply of rentals go up? Is that such a bad thing? No. But the people who want to lump the middle class as the petite bourgeoisie in with Jeff Bezos, they're the ones who are going to ruin that policy. Yang's got it right. Fund it with a VAT, because there's no way Bezos can avoid that. You are going to capture 10% of Amazon's, not profits, gross net income every year.
Yes.
Every year. That's where the money should be coming from.
Yeah, and I see you having these. You make these tweets all the time, and like, for anyone who doesn't get it, you're bringing up the point that we need a pragmatic, tangible outcome for not just poor people and not just middle class people, but everyone needs to feel that lift up and boost, or else it's just not going to work, and the outcome's going to be worse than if we had done nothing. It'll be worse to the outcome of the universal basic income in general, the movement in general.
Yeah, I know, and the truth of the matter is, Yang's policy really is a win-win situation, because even though Jeff Bezos, through his most of his wealth is tied up in his shares of Amazon, right? Mm-hmm. So even though Amazon paying more tax, it means in practice Bezos is paying more tax on his wealth. Nevertheless, because of all the extra discretionary income that regular Americans have, Amazon's still going to end up making more money too.
Right.
But this is something that the alt-right and the far left have in common. They both have a zero-sum view of human relations, where one side has to win and the other side has to lose. That's not correct. Liberals have this right. Classic liberals understand that you need mutually beneficial exchange. That is the way to make the world a better place.
Yes. And that is the nature of how we can do it in a society with relative abundance. And so, yeah. Okay, so maybe we can dumb it down to that. Can the Biden administration take on the gospel of abundance? Hopefully they can, and we can move forward. So just to wrap this up, do you think that it's crucial that the Senate goes blue, or can we do it without it?
It would certainly help. I think it's crucial that Andrew Yang start setting up meetings with every member of the House and every member of the Senate, Republican and Democrat, one at a time, and convince them to support a certain piece of legislation called the Freedom Dividend, and that he needs to sell it to them as a centrist policy, not as a crazy far left policy, not as a libertarian Trojan horse to destroy the safety net policy, as a centrist policy. Some people think that the Overton window is the problem, and that all we need to do to solve America's problems is expand it so that now we can include fascism and communism. No. What we need an alternative approach to centrism. We need liberalism 2.0. We need to upgrade capitalism. We need to see deeper into the Overton window, not look at the fringes of it. If Yang can go around and sell people in Congress on that one at a time during a Biden administration, that would have a chance of passing, and it would actually hopefully help de-radicalize people. I'm still not so sure about that, but I hope so.
Scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most optimist, how are you feeling? Like where we are right now?
I'm feeling great. I'm on cloud 9 because, like I said, my side already won.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we use the power while we have it to make sure that we win next time. And that's where I'm going to be focusing my efforts going forward.
Okay, well, I look forward to us returning to this conversation as more information comes down the road. There's a deep part of me that wanted to be able to relax and hang up the armor and return to my family in the Elysium fields, but it never ends. The fight will continue on until this is the story of progress, so there will be much more to talk about, I think.
Yeah. And, maybe I can just do one episode a week instead of 3 a week for a little while. That's kind of a nice break. I also thought that maybe I would allow some guest hosts to host episodes of the Moving Forward podcast. Like, instead of me talking to you, Seth, maybe like you could talk to Chet or something like that, just to mix it up a little bit so that I could use a break too. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I would love to have a conversation with Chet.
3 episodes a week is a lot of work.
Well, you've been doing a great job, and you're a role model to myself, and like that kind of work ethic is it's enriching to lifestyles. Maybe because I struggle with this. I want to tell people, like, listen, you can put down your phone now. I mean, maybe after you donate $5 or $25 to the Senate races in Georgia, but listen. Hey, I mean it. This is the time to take a deep breath. Work on yourself a little bit. I myself follow along with my Twitter. I've started a 28-day challenge at the minimum of taking a freezing cold shower every single day to challenge myself and make myself uncomfortable. But I've spent too much time on worrying about the state of politics. The world will also improve if you take a look at yourself and try to improve yourself. We've got until inauguration and beyond to worry about what's coming down the road.
And Georgia is going to get flooded with money from both parties. So, the other side is going to have money coming in from all over the country. And a lot of people don't realize this, but there are a lot of Republicans in California. There's actually more Republicans in California than in any other state, because the population is so high, and they're going to be sending money to Republican candidates in Georgia. Right. Even if they're part of like the 10 to 13% of Republicans who voted for Joe Biden, especially in states like California, they still don't want Joe Biden to have a democratically controlled Senate and House. So there's going to be a big fight in Georgia. Take a break, put up your feet, have a beer or whatever. But, also go donate a couple $1,000s to both of the Senate candidates if you can afford it.
So if my theory about when Trump's name is on the ticket is correct, honestly, I don't have that much hope about Georgia. There are some crazy things happening there, and who knows? Registration is open. Registration is open till December the 7th. If you are in Georgia, if you are listening to this, or if you have family or friends who live in Georgia, let them know if they did not vote in this year's election, they can register and be available for the runoff.
Well, it was really close the first time around, which means that at a bare minimum, the Democrats did something right this time. Sometimes they try to run in like a socially conservative state. They try to run somebody who has the same views on social issues as somebody running for mayor of LA,
Right.
That's a huge mistake. Don't do that. You need to run like a more moderate person in those states. So it looks like the Democratic Party has a real shot there. I would not consider it a waste of time and money to try to help them win. I'm probably going to switch I've been registered Democrat, so I could vote for Yang in the primary. I'm probably going to switch back to Republican so that I can try to influence the Republican Party to go in more of a humanity first direction, and also recenter on its individual liberty, small government version of conservatism rather than the collectivist kind, frankly. But long term, who knows? I'll be with whichever party embraces human capitalism and liberalism 2.0.
I like it. I like the work you're doing, man. Thank you for leading the conversation forward. Really. So I want to say, like, we're in a new era now. Is it still gumbo that we're cooking in the kitchen, or what's next? What comes after gumbo?
I don't know. What's the Star Trek version of gumbo?
Well, it's something that's made by a 3D, food bio
3D printed gumbo.
Yeah, you ask it and it appears, basically.
That would be nice.
I may be going outside of my boundaries here by making the next food item on the list, but I felt like it might be necessary.
What do you think it should be?
Wow. Jeez, I'm not too sure. I do want to quickly say I see the people in the chat leaving the conversation. I have a lot to say, so stay along for the after show. This has been a powerful episode. So a powerful food for a powerful episode has got to be, I don't know. See, I'm partial to meatloaf, but that's not gonna fly.
All right. Well, why don't you say it the classic way for now, and then we'll keep our eyes and ears open for a more.
I dig it. Andrew Yang has been my gumbo. Thank you so much, Rio, for having me on.
You're welcome. Cheers.
Cheers. All right. Concerning the technical issues that we had today, I'm going to I'm going to continue the stream a little bit forward. Oh, did you escape? Yeah. Okay. Hey, well, he's out of here. That kind of works. I'll be able to send him a message on Twitter and get that taken care of. For everyone who was in the chat, thank you. Thank you for making it all the way here to the end. But we have some powerful comments, some very interesting comments that I wanted to just address very quickly. So I saw some things in the chat, very provocative information. And I just wanted to thank so much everyone for joining. Vaughn, thank you for being here. Nam, Revolutionary Thinking, NPR, it's so good to see you as well. Let's just take a quick look and see what kind of things have been said. Let me see here. Let me see. There were some interesting questions. I'm specifically going to comment only on the questions with the question mark that I see here. Rio, Bob Benson asked in the chat, Rio, does he call himself a conservative, a classical conservative Republican, as opposed to an alt-right Republican? He mentioned to me before we went live that classical conservative Republican is the term that he would go with. So that was the answer to that. You know, I also saw Dope in the chat. Dope, thank you so much for mentioning how much you appreciate the conversation that was happening. I do appreciate that as well. I also happen to notice John Smith in the chat. It's so good to see you, John. Hard to believe that may be a real name. It sounds like a anonymous person, but thank you nonetheless for joining into the chat. It's good to see you here. I also happen to see Ballin coming in with some provocative things that he wanted me to probably comment on. I can't tell the genuine nature of those comments, but you know, let's see what happens here. He wanted to know if Trump might expose alien top secrets. I don't think that the real puppet masters actually ever trusted Trump with that information. If he hasn't said anything yet, he won't say anything afterwards. He also wanted to know about the hidden society in Antarctica. We're getting into deep Earth theory at this point, where the actual Nephilim have been living under the ground for millennia. And I'm not too sure if Trump is going to blow the lid on that or not, but we will just have to see moving forward exactly what happens from there. He also says that some say that the Fibonacci code is the cure for coronavirus. I'm not too sure about that, but as far as quadratic equations may go into vaccine distribution, you know, the more the merrier. And if that happens to follow some kind of beautiful pattern, we'll just have to see about it or not. Russiagate was 4 years of BS. I wanted to talk about this really quick because I've heard this a lot within the red leaning atmosphere about how Russiagate, we got an impeachment and it was all over nothing. And we've had all of these things come out to light to show that it was all over nothing. Joe Rogan's last episode with CIA ex-lead Mike Baker, they said this again as well. I'm a little confused about this because to me, it wasn't about whether or not Russia won the election for Trump, as they like to suggest was the case, but it was the fact that Trump asked Russia to help him in the election. Whether or not they actually did help him or not isn't the point. It's the fact that he sought comfort from foreign nations in a sovereign democratic election of the United States of America, which was the big question. And given the entire Hunter Biden story that was flat, if you will, I have to say that it seems that he still tried again. But that's just me. Who knows? We don't really know what happened. We may never know what happened. Balin, this is the point in which you start to diverge from the interests that I have. I thought you were on point with Antarctica up until that point. I'm sorry, it's Balin, I believe, maybe, The Hobbit. I do love Lord of the Rings and Tolkien myself. But he says universal basic income will make everything more expensive and destroy entrepreneurship. If you've spent any time on my channel, then you would know that I've covered this quite some in the past, that in every single situation, in every single pilot or study or any cash transfer situation that we know of, in fact, the opposite seems to be true. A universal basic income gives more powers to consumers, more choices. The increased velocity of money actually points to things becoming a little less expensive over time as competition in the free market is allowed to foster a better environment. And now if you pair that with the reality we find ourselves in today, in which more and more people are working from home and choosing different locations to live in, cheaper locations to live in, we can only expect that dynamic to improve over time. But I'll be honest with you, there are no basic income advocates out there who would tell you that we are looking forward to, say, not doing anything should the situation arise in which prices somehow rise or inflations follow with it. If you believe in the innovation, the basic fundamental nature of a free market, quote unquote, innovation is the outcome, and that leads to lower prices over time in the relative scope of abundance that it provides at the end of the day. Supply will always outpace demand, except for really, really scarce things on the planet, which for the most part is not going to be too much of the market in general. So I also know that Nom Nom had some questions as well. Let me go ahead and take a look and see what the question was about. Oh, totally research COVID exaggeration. Yeah, there were some claims being made about how the media has been misguiding us about the severity and nature of the coronavirus epidemic. And this one is very interesting to me because it's a powerful and provocative statement to make. Listen, I went through a couple of years of distrust in the media myself after 2016. There's a big difference, though, in the nature of how the Democratic Party treats its own candidates and the nature in which an electoral system works. The Democratic Party can take all of the votes that it may get in a primary season and say, well, we still don't care. We're going to elect whoever we are. To the degree in which they deceive people is completely up to them because they can do that. To the degree in which our institutions deceive us, it becomes a little harder, our democratically elected institutions, it becomes a little harder to muddy the waters in. For instance, we keep a track in this country every single year of the total amount of deaths that occur within a country. And from that, we are able to determine in one year or another if more people are dying than they did the year before. And so we can clearly see this year, the last time I looked at it, it was approaching 300,000 at that point of the year. 300,000 more Americans were dead than they were the year prior. So whenever I hear these claims about how, doctors are being paid money to falsely label COVID deaths when they were actually just a heart attack or something else, right? 6% of comorbidities and whatnot. All of these numbers and anything deeper than that is irrelevant to me because you can just look at the excess deaths and understand that even if COVID is a hoax, crafted by the media to take down Donald J. Trump and force us all into some kind of dystopian society in which we all wear masks and lose our freedoms. Even if that were the case, you have to come up with some explanation for the hundreds of thousands of excess deaths. If it's not COVID, there is some pandemic of thing that is killing us at this point. It bothers me quite a bit to hear a lot of Republican or right-leaning pundits talk about how suicides are rapidly increasing and look at the amount of opioid deaths that are occurring. Listen, I've spoken quite a bit about how much I think mental health is a crisis in our country and suicide is the number 2 cause of death amongst young adults aged 25 to 36. This is a huge problem. In pre-pandemic times, I have talked about this. So I find it awfully rich that now all of a sudden the right cares about suicides. Come on, that's a little rich if you ask me. Listen, it is an intellectually lazy take to imagine that the pandemic is a crafted narrative. Respect your intellect just a little more. That's all I'm asking, because I understand the people who engage in these channels and these discussions, the intelligence exists within you. And that's all I have to say about that. Listen, and again, I am distrustful of the mainstream media. Although I may be happy that we defeated authoritarianism, I certainly hope that you won't find me parroting CNN and MSNBC in the weeks and months to come as I transform my channel into whatever stage comes next. Because, a healthy dose of skepticism is always necessary, but not when it flies in the face of just common basic sense, in my opinion. But that's just me, and we all share different thoughts, I think. So just kind of moving forward on from that little tangent and rant there, let's see what else was said. Who is my guest? I like him. That is Rio. Rio Verdner. You can find him on Twitter at Riopublican, RIOPUBLICAN. Riopublican, you can find him there. He also is the current host of the Moving Forward podcast, which this episode was kind of a co-production between the two of us, but you can find that on whatever podcast listening service that you may follow. I highly recommend checking him out. He has some very good content there. I would go back and listen from the beginning forward because it's a very cool progression that show has made. So Bob Benson brings up very rightly in the chat that a lot of the UBI slams against in that have happened in the comments have been without science and studies to back up. Again, I fully agree with this, and this was my biggest issue with Trumpism is the proclivity to lean towards a just disregard and disrespect for science. Understand this, the way that we are engaging right now, the words leaving my mouth and entering into your ears, vibrating off of the hairs in your cochlea and transmitting the electrical signals into your brain is because of technology, is because of a belief in the scientific method. Science is the reason why our standard of living. I know a lot of people want to say that it's just capitalism, but no, you have to have science as a part of that equation. If you reject science, you reject all of the wonderful improvements that we've made in our life and you go backwards. I understand skepticism and distrust in our institutions, but lean on science wherever you may have the opportunity to do so. That is, again, my rant. We'll continue forward here just a little bit. Oh, Ballin also says that UBI will make drug dealers rich. To some extent, I actually kind of agree with this claim insofar as we have a black market. The 2020 election cycle may not have been a repudiation of Donald J. Trump, but it does seem to be, in at least some areas of the country, a repudiation against the war on drugs. We've seen tremendous reformations spanning from decriminalizing all drugs in Oregon, following along with the Portuguese kind of oh, my background just fell out. What's going on there? Who knows? Some scary things happening in the background, but following the Portuguese methodology of, well, let's go ahead and try the other end of the spectrum of what we've been doing so far. I think without safe injection sites in Portland, that's really a crucial part of the equation. So we'll have to see exactly what goes on there. And they're currently in such a tense time of the year in history as we know it. I'm hoping it turns out well. There are some missing parts of the recipe to progress that I see there. Nonetheless, we've also seen in Washington, D.C., for instance, a legalizing, or not legalizing, but perhaps decriminalizing possession of psilocybin mushrooms and psychedelics in general, I believe. So we're starting to see this progress to the elimination of black markets because, yes, people consume drugs, and that's not going to stop after we pass a universal basic income. Although I should note here that it has been proven time and time again that the poor consume less drugs than the wealthy. The wealthy, far more often than not, have access and consume high-quality drugs, cocaine, a lot of alcohol, cannabis. You now have high society cannabis communities in Colorado. So, to some degree, drug dealers will do very well, or like their business isn't going to suffer, I should say, after the passing of a universal basic income. But that is a problem in determining how we allow black markets to exist within our society. If you regulate and tax and provide safe injection centers, like this is a pretty radical idea. I understand this. And perhaps I should spend an entire episode going into this because even among the left, this can be a radical notion. And I understand that. I don't consider myself that far left, but this is something important to me because right now, and I know this from personal experience, people who are close to me, our existing rehab and drug, how we deal with it right now, it's just a way for institutions to make money that prey on the addiction of people who are in need or in the cycle of poverty. It's just another money-making situation. And I would have to spend far too long on this specific notion to continue along with it. But let's move forward just a little bit because we've been going on for a bit long. But thank you again for all of the comments here in the chat. Let me take a quick look here. Can you please talk about capital gains tax and the freedom dividend? So, I do know that the capital gains portion on the way that Yang had on his platform, that can be considered pretty controversial amongst some economics. If you're more right-leaning, that's just not it's a punitive tax on people who make money in ways through the stock market and investing and things of that nature. I don't think that it's crucially necessary. Like, understand that the VAT tax alone, yeah, it's not going to fund the totality of the basic income fund in general, but as we can tell just off of the way that our economic system has worked in the past year, there is some leeway that we can have. The deficit is a utility of the economy. I'm not saying that modern monetary theory is correct or not. I'm not going to go that far, but we don't have to have the capital gains tax. It's just, if you are a deficit hawk, it makes more sense to have more ways to fund it. If you're as far right as Rio is, then you don't even mess with that whatsoever. I don't think that Yang's platform in general was insightful enough to make it an issue. But that's me, of course, and I do lean a little bit more left when it comes to the quote-unquote social redistribution aspect of things. I don't think it would be enough for the wealthy in our society to notice tremendously, because if you are making a big enough portion of your income through dividends, then you should be well enough off to not have it matter. I'm not too sure, though. I'm making some claims there that I don't want to set that in stone whatsoever. Mental health and financial floor are reasons for separated families. Let me take a look at that again. Yeah, I agree. I think someone made a claim in the chat that the only way that we get to progress is kind of by returning to a traditional family structure. And, it is important for kids to grow up into an environment that's healthy and an environment that is stable. To the degree in which that's quote unquote a traditional family structure, I think varies quite a bit. I think love is the most crucial aspect of that. But I do fall on the belief that it is important for us to make it easier, not harder, for family structures to exist. And that will be something I think Rio would agree upon me, is that our existing welfare structure can provide disincentives for instance, getting a job. If you get the job, you lose the income. And since work is more precarious these days than it ever has been, reapplying for benefits in the case that something doesn't work out is an extremely troublesome and time-consuming effort. And in some ways, the existing welfare net can harm the structure of families around the country and whatnot. But it's a pretty provocative claim, but within it, there is a discussion to have. I absolutely think so. Ballin then goes on to say, satirically, I believe that he wants Schumer and Pelosi to fix his life, his bad choices, and reckless lifestyle. Bad choices exist whatever economic class you may find yourself in. It just so happens that the existing structure of a safety net, or not a safety net, but something to fall back on, to try again. Believe it or not, humans make mistakes. People make mistakes. That's a part of being a human. Now, whether or not you are allowed to learn from a mistake, which is important. If you don't learn from mistakes, then you're not ever able to reach a point in history where you build a rocket and get to the moon. If we continue to reject the possible notion, or it's not even that we reject it, we allow it for a certain class of people. We allow it for the wealthy. If they are able to, next month I've got the savings and everything, it's okay. Listen, a universal basic income is something you can rely on. If you make a mistake in 1 month and you're out on the street, no one enjoys that. If you've got some deeper actual addiction issues and mental health issues, then we need to have institutions in place to deal with that. But understand, it is far more likely that you are thrown into a cycle of poverty that is systemic. It is existing not because of the actions of a few people. It is a far broader issue. But again, a lot of nuance within that conversation. A lot of nuance. We're going to continue on just a little bit here. Rich people deserve a UBI too. That's an interesting point to make. And yes, I kind of agree, right? To the extent that the VAT tax funds a universal basic income, the rich will see it too. In fact, the wealthy who spend more would see less. It would be a funding structure that doesn't punish the rich as so far it punishes consumers who go away and above beyond their means. Within Andrew Yang's funding itself, it would be spending over $120,000. But yeah, the important thing is to know that you see the effect of the universal basic income in some way or another, whether that's from you or members of your family. Even though you might have a wealthy family, your son who leaves high school, he sees the $1,000 a month in his bank account. That's important because we don't want to live in a world where universal basic income passes and only a very small amount of people gain benefit from it, because then it's just going to be a weaponized effort against it that will pass and succeed, especially here in the United States, understanding how the rhetoric works in our society. The Senate is still a concern. That is correct, Bob. I'm currently biting my nails just thinking about it, but we have a lot more time. Don't sit and worry. Allow yourself a deep breath in the meantime. I can see that Brian already kind of gave an answer along the same lines that I just gave. Income inequality starts with individuals. No government, no politician is the answer. That is an interesting take to make. Income inequality starts with individuals. So income is an inherent property of the natural world. It sounds like Ballin is saying. Income exists from the moment you step foot onto this planet. And it's because you just don't choose to go out and get it. No, income is a utility of society. It is a tool. It is a lever that you can increase or decrease. It just depends on how you structure things. So you can exist in a world in which automation has largely reduced the need for call center workers and taxi drivers. And at that point, the person who's been doing that for 20 years of their life, that's not a choice that they made to stop producing income. Of course, at this point, I understand that the backing to that allegation is, well, they didn't choose to learn a new task or a new blah, 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 blah. That really, I mean, come on, we understand this for what it is. It is the just world hypothesis, the belief that inherently within this world exist rules that say if you follow karma, if you follow this tenet of how we set up society, you will do good. And that's just not the case. People left Britain to come to America were really, they say to practice their own faith, but it's because they had issues with the existing socio-political, right? Like that's the thing that kills me. The people who like to say, oh, socialism is totally evil, at that point they will accept that there are systems in which people cannot improve their lifestyle, cannot climb up the ladder, the social mobility, if you will. But no, it's always perfect here in America, even with changing technology on an exponential scale. It's just disingenuous to believe that, in my opinion, of course, in my opinion. Let's continue on here just a little bit. Rapper 50 Cent. Yeah, I saw rapper 50 Cent and Lil Pimp, as Donald Trump likes to call him, endorsed Donald J. Trump, which was wild, absolutely wild. I missed the rest of that comment and I can't seem to find it. Let me see here. Let me see. Bob pointing out that some of these questions feel a little trollish. I agree. I preferred the conversation about deep Earth theory before it got into the other conversations, because that's the real. Those are the real things we need to be getting to the bottom of, if there is a bottom, which there may not be. Let me see. If I've missed any comments or anything, I do apologize, but I want to make sure that I make it here through the end of everything. And let me see here. Basic sense, like heart-related deaths decreased, like zero. Iatrogenic causes of death. Listen, I understand that there are probably going to be a lot of interesting statistics and rates of death and causes of death and mortality. Again, if you just go to the basic excess death statistics, even like you can't say, oh, well, 300,000 more people died of heart attacks this year than they would in any given normal year. It's just, come on, really, really. Both parties got it wrong. FFS, yeah, mostly, yeah. Let's see here. Decriminalization in Oregon, good. Wizard of Oz moment in the background. Indeed, I don't know why it decided to do that, but someone was asking earlier in the chat if I had a digital background or not, and I guess I can't lie about that anymore. Let me see here. I wish they would send all drug addicts to your home and you can take care of them. I know that you're trying to be provocative with your claim here, right? This is the same type of thing of prison. Is it for rehabilitation or is it for punitive measures? But at the end of the day, when you get down to this individual level of how you want society to work, well, one, it's a little myopic. But two, in my personal experience with drug-related issues, the thing that's been missing the entire time has been human connection. If you have someone in your family, and chances are you do, chances are if you're one of the 15 people in the chat right now, you're closer to this epidemic, this crisis, than you may think you are. These people, they just need some human connection. You know, in many of the hunter-gatherer societies, the few of them that still exist in our world today, the rates of mental illness like schizophrenia are quite low, but when they do still occur, and when people have asked these tribes, like how do you engage with these individuals, they just say, oh well, you know, we talk to them, we huddle around them, and we take care of them, and eventually the voices, they don't always go away, but it's interesting how the voices they may hear in their own head turn out to be a little bit more positive. They don't hear quite the same negativity that people in the first world countries like the United States hear when they're dealing with mental issues like schizophrenia. We fundamentally have a crisis of separation of humanity. There are problems that a universal basic income is not going to fix. There's a problem that the decriminalization of drugs will not fix. There will be work to be done, believe me, yes. But there is no problem within our world that we cannot fix if we have enough intelligence. Intelligence is the thing that will move us forward into the future. There's no doubt about that in my mind. Absolutely. Absolutely. If they lack the social mobility and automation are causing people not to succeed, then why are undocumented people risking their lives to sneak into America? Well, I mean, it doesn't exist within a black and white system. Automation can occur, and that's not going to suddenly stop people from leaving Mexico, which is further beyond the curve of dealing with exponential technology and displacement of labor, right? In fact, you would expect it to increase. You know, if Donald Trump were to say, oh, we're going to bring all of these jobs back to America, which he has said, and which on the debate floor, you heard them make the claim that manufacturing is skyrocketing. If you look at the numbers, employment in manufacturing has never risen beyond the levels that it did in 2008. Our production has skyrocketed. That is true. The production's going way up, but our employment in manufacturing has still never reached the levels as it did beyond 2008. And that's because in 2008, we all trimmed the fat, right? These industries suddenly tried to find out how much they could do with less workers. They didn't have an impetus to lay off people on the numbers they did until there was an economic crisis. And you can expect that to happen right now. The economic crisis occurs. We're going to implement the latest and greatest technology that we have to squeeze out as much production as we can with the fewest amount of workers. But again, if anything, that's just going to make the issue worse. The people who have typically relied on their status as a migrant or an undocumented laborer are going to become increasingly more and more desperate because the opportunities, legal or otherwise, that they may have had before will be less available to them. So I'm not sure exactly what your comment is implying there. I may be missing some point. Something tells me that I'm not, though. Like, again, social mobility is a gradient curve, if you will. The entire reason that I bring up automation is not to say that it is the fact that why does pulling yourself up by your bootstrap matter based upon the availability of what another person may or not pay you? Shouldn't the pull yourself up by your bootstrap instead be correlated with the curve of how much resources are available in a community, in a society in general, right? Like, what are the basic requirements for survival? Base your labor curve on that. Anything otherwise is excess, is luxury, it's opulent, right? At that point, that's a downward curve. So that's the problem I have fundamentally with that argument, because again, there's no law of economics that says that there will be some shortage of job and you're automatically going to move into some society that accepts abundance. No, there will always be a job for you if we rely on a system that uses income as the resource for survival. Income is the resource for survival. You can't go out and just start your own farm and agriculture and everything. Not in our society, not in the rules that we play. our survival resource is income. And as long as all of the power and wealth exists within one group of people, if you don't have a systemic infrastructure in place to provide the income, it's going to reach an end game. It will reach an end game just by the nature of its physics. That seems clear, and that's the direction that we're heading right now. So, thank you so much. It seems like we have reached the end of all of the interesting responses that I got during the course of this episode. Y'all, this was powerful. This was powerful, and some of the remarks that I made, I know, were provocative and kind. It's been a long time. Listen, you guys mean so much to me for hanging in there, and we're going to really go far. I want you to stay tuned. There are interesting things to come. Make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure that you hit the bell, and make sure that you spend a little bit of time on your own mental health in the days to come. Whether you have won this week, whether you have lost this week, make human connection an important thing in your life, but also remember to stay socially distanced. The rates are absolutely insane right now. Make sure that you're following me at The Dividend Report on Twitter. And if you wanted to listen to this episode in entirety, but not use YouTube's wonky, autoplay feature or have it on in the background, this will be uploaded to the Moving Forward podcast. You can find them wherever you get your podcasts of choice. That's going to do it for today's episode. Stay in touch. I'll update on the YouTube channel as we go forward. You guys have a great night. Good night.